The emergency signal cut through every communication channel in the Talvine battle fleet. Admiral Reth watched his tactical display flicker and reset as the override protocol took control. In 30 years of military service, he had never seen this particular warning code. His second officer turned from her station with confusion written across her scaled features. Admiral, the message is coming from Central Command, but also from the Corvex fleet. Impossible. The Talvine Dominion and the Corvex Alliance had been locked in war for 8 brutal years. They agreed on nothing. They shared no communication protocols. They certainly never coordinated warnings. Reth moved closer to the main screen as the automated message played again in both Talvine and Corvex languages. Immediate withdrawal required from Sector 47, Grid Theta 9. Human vessel approaching contested zone. All combat operations must cease within 30 standard minutes. This is not a negotiation. His crew exchanged glances. Humans were traders. They ran shipping routes between neutral systems and sold basic goods at fair prices. Their small merchant vessels dotted the outer territories, always polite, always staying far from military conflicts. Why would both sides of a galactic war stop fighting because one human ship showed up? "Pull the human files," Reth ordered. "I want to know what we're dealing with." The information scrolled across his screen. Humanity had joined the galactic community 40 years ago after developing faster-than-light travel. They maintained a small presence in neutral space. Their technology lagged behind most species by several generations. They used primitive fusion reactors instead of zero-point energy. Their weapons systems were documented as projectile-based rather than modern plasma arrays. Most importantly, they had never involved themselves in any conflict. Every territorial dispute, every trade disagreement, every diplomatic incident for 4 decades had seen humans remain carefully neutral. "Sir, we're receiving the warning again. 25 minutes until recommended withdrawal." "Tactical, what's our status with the Corvex fleet?" "They're holding position near the mining station, Admiral. 3 cruisers and 15 support craft. They haven't moved since the warning broadcast." Reth made a decision. His fleet held superior numbers and position. Whatever human ship approached, it posed no real threat. The Corvax clearly understood this because they weren't retreating either. Both sides were calling what had to be an absurd bluff. "Maintain position. All ships ready for combat. If the Corvax try to use this distraction, I want immediate response capability." 12 minutes later, the sensors registered a new contact. A single vessel emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the contested zone. The ship measured roughly 300 meters in length. Compared to Reth's flagship at 2,000 meters, it barely qualified as a frigate. Its design looked blocky and inelegant. Exposed hull plating suggested armor rather than shield generators. The reactor signature confirmed primitive fusion technology. "That's their warship?" his weapons officer asked. "Admiral, our shields could absorb their entire arsenal without dropping below 90% capacity." "Scan for additional ships. This could be a scout for a larger force." The sensors found nothing. One human frigate had entered a battle zone where 47 warships from 2 opposing fleets faced each other over a strategic mining facility. Reth almost felt insulted. "Sir, the human ship is broadcasting on all frequencies." A woman's voice filled the bridge, speaking accented but clear galactic common. "This is Captain Ann Reyes of the human frigate Steadfast Mercy. We have civilian population on the 3rd moon of this system. Your conflict has entered protected human territory. You have 18 minutes to withdraw beyond the boundary markers, or we will enforce evacuation." Reth checked his charts. There was indeed a small colony on the moon, just under 40,000 humans living in a mining settlement. He had assumed it was abandoned like most civilian sites near combat zones, but even with people present, the threat made no sense. "One ship," he said aloud. They sent one ship to protect 40,000 civilians against two battle fleets. His tactical officer brought up the Korvax communication channels. Their commander, someone named Dren according to intelligence reports, was laughing on an open channel. The Korvax captain called the human demand a joke. He suggested the human frigate leave before it got caught in the crossfire between real military forces. Captain Reyes responded with the same calm voice. "Final warning. Withdraw now. We are authorized to use all necessary force to protect human lives." The Korvax fleet opened fire on the mining station. They weren't aiming at the human ship. They simply resumed their attack as if the steadfast mercy didn't exist. Reth watched plasma bolts streak across the darkness toward the facility his own fleet was defending. Standard warfare. Standard tactics. Then the human ship moved. Every sensor on Reth's flagship screamed alerts simultaneously. The human frigate accelerated from stationary to combat speed in under 2 seconds. No ship could do that. The gravitational forces would crush the crew. But the steadfast Mercy crossed 15,000 kilometers in a blur of motion and positioned itself directly between the Korvax fleet and the mining station. The plasma bolt struck the human ship's hull. Reth expected shields to flare. Instead, the bolts simply splashed against bare metal and dissipated. The armor absorbed weapons fire that should have crippled a ship that size. "Admiral, their hull temperature just rose 40 degrees and stopped. Those plasma cannons didn't even scratch the surface." Captain Reyes spoke again, and this time her voice carried a different tone. "You fired on a human-protected zone. You endangered human civilians. Diplomatic options are concluded." The human ship's weapon ports opened. Reth counted 20 hardpoints along the frigate's profile. His computer analyzed the signatures and returned impossible data. Kinetic weapons, magnetic accelerators, chemical rockets with primitive guidance systems. Nothing that belonged in modern space warfare. "Sir, the Korvax are charging weapons for another volley. Should we engage?" Reth didn't answer. He was watching the human frigate's reactor spike to levels that should cause immediate meltdown. Energy readings climbed higher and higher as those 20 weapons charged with power no fusion reactor should produce. Captain Reyes delivered her final message. "You were warned. We do not give third chances." The human warship fired. Weapons Officer Tal pressed herself against her console as the first railgun round punched through the Korvax destroyer. She had served on Admiral Reth's flagship for 6 years. She understood shield physics, energy dispersion, plasma coherence. What she witnessed now violated every principle of modern warfare. The tungsten slug traveled at 12% of light speed. It hit the Korvax destroyer's forward shield and simply kept going. The shield collapsed instantly. The projectile tore through 5 decks, the reactor core, and out the stern before the computer could finish calculating impact damage. The destroyer broke apart without even managing a distress call. "Multiple launches from human vessel," Tal reported, her voice steady despite trembling hands. "Tracking 18 individual projectiles. Velocity profiles match chemical propulsion. Admiral, they're firing missiles." Captain Dren's voice erupted across the Korvax command channel, broadcasting his outrage on an unsecured frequency. He called the humans barbarians for using kinetic weapons. He claimed their attack violated the Galactic Convention on Civilized Warfare. He demanded the Talvine fleet join him in destroying this primitive threat. Reth ignored him. He was reading the tactical analysis his computer generated about those missiles. Each one carried a warhead mass of 3,000 kilograms. The signature matched nuclear fission weapons. Humans were firing atomic bombs in space combat. "They banned those weapons 4,000 years ago," his second officer whispered. "After the Perlean Wars, every species agreed nuclear weapons were too destructive for military engagement." "Humans weren't part of that agreement," Reth said quietly. They didn't join the galactic community until 40 years ago. Another railgun round destroyed a Korvax cruiser. This time Tal watched the entire sequence. The human ship's magnetic accelerator charged in 3 seconds. The tungsten projectile launched with no visible propulsion, just raw kinetic energy. When it struck, the cruiser's shields managed to slow it by perhaps 10% before failing. The slug retained enough velocity to core the ship from bow to stern. The missiles reached their targets. 12 of them detonated simultaneously among the Korvax formation. The nuclear explosions created expanding spheres of superheated plasma and radiation. Shields that could absorb directed energy weapons for hours overloaded in seconds against the omnidirectional blast waves. 3 more Korvax ships went dark as their systems fried from electromagnetic pulses. Sir, the Korvax are breaking formation. 8 ships destroyed, 5 more critically damaged. They're attempting to retreat. Reth expected the human frigate to pursue. Standard doctrine said to press an advantage and eliminate fleeing enemies. The steadfast Mercy held position instead. Captain Reyes broadcast a single message to the retreating Korvax forces. You may leave. Do not return to human-protected space. The surviving Korvax ships accelerated toward the jump point, abandoning their disabled comrades. Reth watched Captain Dren's flagship lead the retreat. The Korvax commander's earlier confidence had vanished completely. Admiral, what are your orders? Should we engage the human ship while it's focused on the Korvax? Logical tactical thinking. The human frigate had expended ammunition, destroying the Korvax fleet. Its reactor was running hot. A coordinated strike from 20 Talvine warships could potentially overwhelm even those impressive defenses. They would take losses, but victory seemed possible. Reth thought about the 40,000 human civilians on that moon. He considered the 8 Korvax warships floating in pieces around the mining station. He remembered that every weapons system his sensors detected on the human ship still showed full charge status. Open a channel to the steadfast Mercy. Captain Reyes appeared on his screen. She looked younger than Reth expected, maybe 40 standard years. Humans aged differently than Talvine, so that could mean anything. Her expression showed no anger, no excitement, no satisfaction at the destruction she had just caused. She simply looked tired. Captain Reyes, this is Admiral Reth of the Talvine Dominion 3rd Fleet. We have received your message about protected territory. The Talvine Dominion has no quarrel with humanity. Your fleet fired on the mining station before we arrived, Admiral. Our sensors recorded 17 direct hits on the facility. Those attacks killed 3 human civilians working dockside repairs. Reth felt his stomach drop. His weapons officers had targeted the station's power systems and shield generators. They used precision strikes specifically to avoid civilian casualties. The facility housed mostly automated systems. How could humans have been working on external repairs during an active battle? We had no indication of civilian presence, Captain. Our intelligence showed the station evacuated 2 months ago. The Korvax blockade prevented evacuation ships from reaching the station. 40,000 humans have been trapped here for 9 weeks. Today was the first time anyone attempted dock repairs since the fighting started. The channel stayed open. Neither commander spoke. Reth understood what happened now. His fleet and the Korvax had treated this facility like every other contested military target. They assumed civilians would flee or hunker down. They never imagined people working outside during combat operations because no galactic species would risk that. But humans came from a death world. Their home planet had weather systems that could destroy cities. They had predators that hunted in packs. Their oceans contained creatures that could swallow ships. They evolved surviving constant danger. Of course, they would try fixing critical systems even during battle. I offer formal apology for Talvine actions that resulted in civilian deaths. It was not intentional. Captain Reyes nodded slowly. I believe you, Admiral. That's why you're still alive. The Korvax commander ignored 47 separate warnings over 6 hours. He fired directly at this station after being told civilians were present. That's why his fleet is destroyed. Will you allow Talvine forces to withdraw? Your ships may leave this system. They may not return while human civilians remain. When our evacuation vessels arrive, you will permit them free passage. After the colony is empty, you can resume your war. Fight over dead rocks all you want, but human lives are not negotiable. Reth gave the withdrawal order. His fleet activated jump drives and began leaving the system one ship at a time. As his flagship prepared for transition, he pulled up the human information files again. He noticed something he missed earlier. The Steadfast Mercy was classified as a patrol frigate. Humans operated 237 warships across their territory. This wasn't their navy. This was one ship on routine patrol duty, and it had just destroyed a battle fleet without taking damage. Ambassador Lewis Grant walked through the observation deck of Neutral Station Gamma with his hands clasped behind his back. Outside the transparent aluminum viewport, stars drifted in perfect silence. Inside the diplomatic meeting room, silence meant something very different. It meant fear. The Talvine and Korvax delegations sat on opposite sides of the conference table. They had been enemies for 8 years. Today they were united in shock and confusion. Both groups stared at Grant as if he might suddenly transform into something dangerous. He found that reaction darkly amusing. They had finally realized humans could be dangerous. They just hadn't figured out why yet. Let me understand your position, the Korvax representative said. Her name was Shira, and she held the rank of colonial administrator. Your military attacked our fleet because we were fighting near a human settlement. Your fleet attacked a human settlement, Grant corrected. Your commander received 47 separate warnings over 6 hours. He ignored every single one. Then he fired on a facility where human civilians were working. That's not fighting near us. That's attacking us. The Talvine were also fighting at that facility. Why did you only destroy Korvax ships? The Talvine withdrew when ordered. Your commander laughed at us and continued shooting. We respond to actions, not politics. The Talvine ambassador, a dignified older male named Korth, leaned forward. His scaled fingers tapped the table's surface nervously. Ambassador Grant, the Talvine Dominion deeply regrets civilian casualties. We had no knowledge of human presence during combat operations. Our records showed the facility evacuated months ago. Your records were wrong. 40,000 people lived on that moon. The Korvax blockade prevented evacuation ships from reaching them. 3 civilians died repairing docking systems so those evacuation ships could eventually arrive. That's 3 murders we couldn't prevent because we weren't there yet. And so you destroyed 8 warships and killed over 4,000 Korvax military personnel, Shira said. Your response seems disproportionate. Grant pulled up a holographic display showing casualty statistics from the 8-year war. In the past 96 months, your 2 civilizations have destroyed 749 ships and killed approximately 3 million soldiers. You fight over mining rights, territorial claims, and old grievances. You follow the Galactic Convention on Civilized Warfare, which means you use shields and energy weapons and fight in neat formations. He changed the display to show the human frigate's attack, the tungsten slugs tearing through shields, the nuclear detonations overwhelming defensive systems, the Korvax fleet scattering in panic. Humans don't fight civilized wars. We fight to win. We fight to protect. When you threaten our people, we use every weapon we have until the threat stops existing. But nuclear weapons are banned, Shira protested. The Galactic Convention specifically prohibits weapons of mass destruction. We signed no such convention. Humanity wasn't part of the galactic community when you all agreed to fight nice. We come from a planet that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. We developed weapons to defeat enemies who wanted us extinct. Those weapons work just fine against energy shields. Korth studied the tactical display. Grant watched him make connections. The Talvine ambassador was smarter than he initially appeared. His eyes widened as understanding dawned. Your projectile weapons bypass modern defenses. Our shields are designed to absorb and deflect energy. They can't stop solid mass. That's correct. A plasma bolt transfers energy across a wide area. A tungsten slug concentrates all its kinetic force on a single point. Your shields are useless against basic physics. So you maintained primitive technology specifically as a strategic advantage. No, Ambassador. We maintained it because it works. Humans don't abandon functional systems just because something seems more advanced. We use fusion reactors because they're reliable. We use kinetic weapons because they're effective. We use nuclear missiles because sometimes you need to make a point that can't be misunderstood. Shira's expression shifted from outrage to calculation. Grant recognized that look. She was running political scenarios in her head. She wanted to know if the Korvax alliance could beat humanity in an extended conflict. How many warships does Earth actually operate, Ambassador Grant? Enough to protect every human settlement in explored space. You don't need the exact number. We could find out through intelligence sources. You could try. You'd discover we have defensive platforms around every colony. You'd learn we maintain rapid response fleets at strategic locations. You'd find out human ships carry enough ammunition for sustained combat lasting months. What you wouldn't discover is how many we can build if we decide we're threatened. Grant pulled up another display. This one showed Earth's industrial capacity, shipyards in orbit around the moon, manufacturing facilities on Mars, automated factories in the asteroid belt. The scale dwarfed anything the Talvine or Korvax could match. Humanity spent 10,000 years fighting ourselves. We built weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We created delivery systems that could reach any target in 30 minutes. We poisoned our own atmosphere and almost made ourselves extinct. Then we learned from it. We stopped fighting each other and focused on surviving the universe instead. So you brought those weapons to space, Korth said quietly. We brought the knowledge. We prefer trading. We prefer peace. We spent 40 years proving we could coexist with everyone. We asked for nothing except fair exchange and respect for our territory. Today you learned what happens when someone doesn't respect those boundaries. Shira stood abruptly. This is a threat. You're threatening both our civilizations. No, Administrator, I'm explaining consequences. You have a war that doesn't involve us. Fight it somewhere else. If your conflict touches human space again, we stop it permanently, not by destroying one fleet, by ending the entire war. The room fell silent again. Grant could see them processing his words. Humans had presented themselves as friendly traders for 4 decades. Nobody paid attention to their military capabilities because humans never threatened anyone. They just quietly built fleets and maintained weapons that could crack modern warships open like eggs. We have a proposal, Grant said. Humanity will establish a neutral corridor between Talvine and Korvax territory. We'll enforce a demilitarized zone. You can both access the disputed systems for mining and research, but no military vessels. If you break this rule, we treat it as an attack on human interests. You want us to stop fighting, Shira said. We want you to stop fighting near us. What you do in your own territory is your business. Threaten our people again and it becomes our business. That's the only rule humanity has. It's very simple. The Korvax War Council met in a secured chamber deep inside their homeworld's military complex. High Commander Tresh reviewed the tactical reports for the 3rd time, hoping the numbers would somehow change. They didn't. One human frigate had destroyed 8 warships and crippled 5 others in under 11 minutes. The casualty count exceeded 4,000 trained soldiers. Our intelligence division has completed analysis of human military capabilities, his chief analyst reported. The results are concerning. Concerning. Tresh would have laughed if the situation weren't so dire. His civilization had been fighting the Talvine for 8 years. They understood Talvine tactics, weapon systems, and strategic doctrine. Humans were supposed to be neutral traders who stayed out of everyone's way. Now they represented a threat that made the Talvine Dominion look manageable. Show me. The holographic display filled with data. Human ship classes, weapon specifications, deployment locations, industrial capacity. Each revelation made Tresh's situation worse. Humans operated 237 confirmed warships. That number alone wasn't overwhelming. The Korvax Alliance fielded nearly 800 combat vessels, but the human ships carried weapons no modern military could effectively counter. Their railguns fire solid projectiles at 12 to 15% of light speed. Our shield technology cannot absorb that kind of kinetic impact. The shields are designed to deflect energy, not stop mass. A single hit from their primary weapons will penetrate any ship we have. What about armor? Can we reinforce our hulls? The Steadfast Mercy punched tungsten slugs through 5 decks and a reactor core. The metal they use is nothing special. The velocity is what matters. To armor against that impact, we would need hull plating 3 meters thick. The added weight would reduce our ships to immobile targets. Tresh moved through the tactical data. Nuclear weapons particularly concerned him. The Galactic Convention banned such weapons 4 millennia ago after the Prelian Wars nearly destroyed 2 entire species. Modern warfare used clean energy weapons that killed efficiently without poisoning entire star systems. Humans apparently missed that memo. Each nuclear warhead generates an explosion equivalent to 50,000 tons of chemical explosive. The blast creates an omnidirectional wave of thermal energy, radiation, and electromagnetic pulse. Our shields fail within seconds against that kind of assault. The radiation persists for weeks afterward, denying us use of battle spaces. So they poison territory to deny us access. Exactly, High Commander. If we fought humans in a prolonged campaign, they could render entire sectors uninhabitable for our ships. Their own vessels are shielded against radiation exposure. They can operate in areas that would kill our crews. Another council member spoke up. What about their industrial capacity? Can they sustain a war against our full military might? The analyst changed displays. Tresh stared at images of human shipyards and manufacturing centers. The scale disturbed him more than the weapons data. Humans operated 14 major shipyards in their home system alone. Automated factories in the asteroid belt produced refined metals and components around the clock. According to intelligence estimates, humans could build warships at twice the rate of the Korvax Alliance. They also maintain extensive stockpiles. The Steadfast Mercy expended approximately 18% of its ammunition, destroying our fleet. It can engage in 5 more battles that size before requiring resupply. 5 more battles, Tresh repeated. 1 patrol frigate could destroy 40 Korvax warships before going home. In theory, yes, sir. The council members exchanged worried glances. Tresh understood their concern. The Korvax Alliance had been winning the war against the Talvine. They controlled 60% of the disputed territories. Victory seemed achievable within another 2 years. Now they faced a species that could end their civilization before they had time to surrender. What do we know about human psychology? Why did they wait 8 years to get involved in our war? They didn't get involved in the war, sir. We got involved in their territory. The humans have one absolute rule that supersedes everything else. Threaten human civilians, face total military response. They warned us 47 times before attacking. Captain Dren ignored every warning because he didn't believe they would actually fight. Tresh remembered Dren's reports. The captain had been confident, almost arrogant about human weakness. He called their threats laughable. He suggested using the human presence as a distraction to outflank the Talvine. That strategy cost him his ship, his career, and nearly 5,000 Korvax lives. Do we have any indication humans want territory expansion? Are they planning to invade Korvax space? No, sir. All intelligence suggests humans genuinely prefer peace. They trade fairly. They respect boundaries. They negotiate honestly. But when someone crosses their lines, they respond with overwhelming force. So we simply avoid human territory, and the problem goes away. It's not that simple anymore, High Commander. The humans are offering to establish a neutral corridor between Korvax and Talvine space. They want to enforce a demilitarized zone. Ambassador Grant made it clear in yesterday's conference. If we continue fighting near human settlements, they will end the war by force. Tresh pulled up the disputed territories map. The strategic mining systems all bordered human space. That was precisely why both sides wanted them. Resources from those systems fed military production. Losing access meant losing the ability to sustain the war effort. They're forcing us to choose between peace and extinction. Yes, sir. The Talvine faced the same choice. We received encrypted communications indicating their High Council is discussing similar options. Have the Talvine proposed anything? They suggested a joint study group to analyze human military doctrine. They want to understand how Earth survived long enough to reach space if their own history was so violent. Tresh considered that. Learning about human history might provide insight into their strategy. It could reveal weaknesses, but more importantly, it might explain why a peaceful trading species suddenly became the most dangerous military force in the sector. Approve the joint study group. Coordinate with Talvine intelligence. I want to know everything about human warfare, their history, their culture, and their psychology. If we're going to share space with a species that uses nuclear weapons, I need to understand what drives them. Sir, should we prepare contingency plans for conflict with humanity? Tresh looked at the casualty reports again. 4,000 dead, 8 ships destroyed, 1 human frigate with minor hull scorching. The math was simple and terrifying. No, we prepare for peace. Because if we go to war with humans, the Korvax alliance won't survive long enough to surrender. Professor Yilla adjusted her translator implant as she reviewed the mountain of historical data. The Talvine scholar had spent 3 weeks studying human records with her Korvax counterpart, a military historian named Brent. Their joint research project was supposed to explain how humanity became so dangerous. Instead, she felt increasingly disturbed by what they discovered. This can't be accurate, Brent said, highlighting a section of human history. It says they fought 2 global wars using chemical weapons, machine guns, and aerial bombardment. The casualties exceed 200 million combined. The data comes from human archives. Multiple independent sources confirm these numbers. 200 million deaths. That's more than the current population of 3 Korvax colony worlds, and they did this to themselves. Yilla pulled up another file. That's just 2 major conflicts. According to their records, humans fought continuously throughout their development. The 20th century alone saw dozens of wars involving millions of soldiers. They invented increasingly deadly weapons and used them on each other regularly. The research chamber they occupied was designed for joint Talvine Korvax projects. Neutral Station Gamma provided facilities where former enemies could work together on shared goals. Learning about humanity apparently qualified as a survival priority for both civilizations. Look at this weapon, Yilla said, displaying technical specifications. They called it a strategic bomber. It could carry conventional explosives or nuclear warheads across entire continents. They built thousands of them. Each one could destroy a city in a single mission. and they used these against population centers. Frequently, the data describes something called total war. They targeted military production, transportation infrastructure, and civilian morale. The goal was breaking enemy resistance through overwhelming destruction. Brent scrolled through battlefield records, chemical weapons that burned lungs, incendiary bombs that created firestorms, artillery barrages that lasted weeks and turned forests into mud. Every innovation seemed designed to maximize casualties and suffering. "I need to understand something," Brent said carefully. "How did they survive this? Most species discover nuclear weapons and either destroy themselves or achieve peace through mutual fear. Humans apparently did both and kept going." Yilla had been wondering the same thing. She found part of the answer in human philosophy texts from the mid-20th century, documents discussing deterrence theory, mutually assured destruction, and the balance of terror. Humans understood they could extinct themselves, so they built enough weapons to guarantee everyone died if anyone started the final war. They created peace through the promise of total annihilation. Every major power maintained weapons that could destroy all the others. Nobody attacked because nobody could win. That's insane. Building weapons specifically designed to kill everyone including yourself. It worked. Their final major conflict ended 80 years before they achieved spaceflight. They dismantled most of those weapons after unifying their planetary government, but they kept the knowledge. They kept the industrial capacity, and apparently they kept enough weapons to equip their entire fleet. Brent pulled up the Steadfast Mercy's attack profile again. The nuclear missiles and kinetic weapons that destroyed the Korvax fleet in minutes. Those weren't new technologies adapted from civilian systems. They were military weapons maintained deliberately across decades of space exploration. They knew they might need to fight someday, so they stayed ready. "More than that," Yilla said, "I think they stayed ready because their entire history taught them that peace requires strength. Every time they weakened, someone attacked them. Every time they trusted without verification, they paid terrible prices. They learned that being nice only works if you can defend yourself." The implications troubled Yilla deeply. Galactic civilization had evolved beyond primitive warfare. Most species reached space through cooperation and peaceful competition. They established the Galactic Convention to ensure conflicts stayed limited and civilized. They used shields and clean energy weapons because those tools allowed military force without permanent destruction. Humans missed all of that cultural development. They jumped straight from global warfare to space travel in less than a century. They brought their weapons and their experience with them, and now everyone else had to adjust. "There's something else," Brent said, opening a new file. "Human protocols for protecting civilians. They have specific rules of engagement that govern military conduct, laws that prohibit targeting noncombatants, treaties that protect medical personnel and prisoners. They developed these rules after experiencing wars without limits." Yilla read through the Geneva Conventions and associated treaties. Humans had codified mercy into military law. They required soldiers to discriminate between fighters and civilians. They mandated humane treatment of defeated enemies. They made protecting the innocent a legal obligation backed by criminal prosecution. So they fight like demons, but they also follow rules. Specific rules: don't attack civilians, don't use poison gas, don't torture prisoners, don't target medical facilities. Everything else is fair combat. That's why Captain Reyes destroyed the Korvax fleet but spared the Talvine. The Talvine accidentally killed civilians and withdrew when warned. The Korvax deliberately continued attacks after being told civilians were present. One was a terrible mistake. The other was a crime that humans will kill you for committing. Brent highlighted casualty statistics from the battle. 4,000 Korvax soldiers died. 3 human civilians died before the Steadfast Mercy arrived. The response seems disproportionate. Only if you think civilian lives and military lives have equal value. Humans don't. Their cultural records are full of statements about protecting innocents at any cost. They have a saying, "Kill one child and we burn your civilization to the ground." That's barbaric. Is it? We evacuate civilian populations before combat. Humans do the same. But when someone attacks their people, they respond with absolute force. Maybe that's why they rarely need to fight. Everyone knows humans mean what they say. Yilla saved their research findings and prepared the report for both high councils. The conclusions were straightforward and deeply uncomfortable. Humans were peaceful because they could afford to be peaceful. They were friendly because they didn't need to prove anything. They traded fairly because they had nothing to gain from cheating. But underneath that gentle exterior lived a species that spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of organized violence. They knew every possible way to kill. They had weapons that could crack planets. They just chose not to use those capabilities unless someone pushed them. "What do we recommend to our governments?" Brent asked. "We recommend staying very, very far away from human civilians. And maybe we suggest that both the Talvin and Korvax consider peace talks before humans decide to enforce peace for us." 6 months after the Battle of Theta Station, Captain Ann Reyes guided the Steadfast Mercy through its regular patrol route. The human frigate moved along the boundary of protected space, running sensors and checking for unauthorized incursions. The job was remarkably boring compared to that one explosive day when she had destroyed 8 warships in 11 minutes. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Neutral Station Gamma. Ambassador Grant wants to speak with you." Reyes smiled. Grant had been working diplomatic channels since the incident, turning humanity's reputation from neutral traders into recognized peacekeepers. She wondered what he needed now. Grant's face appeared on her screen. He looked pleased about something. "Captain Reyes, I have good news. The Talvin and Korvax have agreed to formal peace negotiations. They're asking if humanity would be willing to host the talks." "Host them? Why not use Neutral Station Gamma like usual?" "Because both sides trust us now. The Talvin know we could have destroyed their fleet but chose restraint. The Korvax learned what happens when someone ignores our warnings. Neither side worries about human bias. They worry about human consequences if they misbehave." Reyes considered that. "So we became referees through violence. That's an interesting diplomatic position." "It's effective. I've been using your battle as a teaching moment. Every time negotiations stall, I remind them what happens when conflicts touch human space. Suddenly, everyone becomes very motivated to compromise." "I'm not sure I like being remembered as a mass murderer, Ambassador." "You're remembered as someone who protected civilians against impossible odds. The Korvax attacked a station full of children and families. You made them pay for it. The galaxy respects that kind of commitment." The channel stayed open while Grant waited for her response. Reyes thought about the 3 civilians who died during those early bombardments. Engineers trying to repair docking systems so evacuation ships could land. They had families. They had friends. They died because 2 alien civilizations couldn't be bothered to check if anyone was home before shooting. "Tell them we'll host the peace talks, but make something very clear. If negotiations fail and fighting resumes, humanity will enforce a permanent ceasefire. We're done watching this war threaten our people." "I'll make sure they understand. How's the colony evacuation proceeding?" "Complete as of last week. All 40,000 civilians relocated to safer systems. The moon station is now a human military outpost. If anyone wants to fight over that territory, they can fight us directly." Grant laughed. "I suspect they'll decide the mining rights aren't worth it. Any other incident since Theta Station?" "Nothing serious. We've had a few cases of warships getting too close to human space. They turn around quickly once we hail them. The Steadfast Mercy apparently has a reputation now." You destroyed a fleet single-handedly. Of course you have a reputation. The Galactic News Services ran stories for weeks about human combat capabilities. Every military academy is teaching case studies on your tactics. Reyes felt uncomfortable with the fame. She had done her job. She protected civilians. The fact that required destroying 8 ships and killing thousands of soldiers wasn't something to celebrate. It was a tragedy that should have been prevented if Captain Dren had simply listened to warnings. Ambassador, can I ask you something? Why do you think they ignored us? 47 warnings over 6 hours. What made them think we wouldn't follow through? Grant paused before answering. Because we're nice. We trade fairly. We negotiate in good faith. We help with humanitarian missions. For 40 years, humans have been the friendly species everyone likes. They forgot that nice and weak are different things. So they learned an expensive lesson. The galaxy learned an expensive lesson. Every species now understands human kindness is a choice, not a weakness. We prefer peace, but we're exceptionally good at war. That's a combination nobody was prepared for. The conversation ended with Grant promising to send details about the peace talks. Reyes returned to monitoring her patrol route. The sensors showed empty space in all directions. No threats, no incidents, no battles looming on the horizon. Her communications officer looked up from his station. Captain, I've been reviewing incident reports from other patrol vessels. Since Theta Station, there have been 0 unauthorized incursions into human space. Not one. That's good news. It's unprecedented, ma'am. Before the battle, we had minor violations weekly. Ships cutting through our territory to save time, trading vessels dumping waste in our space, military scouts testing our response times. All of that stopped immediately after you engaged the Korvax. Reyes understood the implication. Humanity had operated in galactic space for 4 decades without anyone taking them seriously. One battle changed everything. Now alien militaries rooted around human territory. Civilian ships asked permission before entering human space. Even pirates avoided areas where human patrols operated. Fear is a powerful motivator. Is that what we want, Captain, to be feared? We want to be left alone. If fear accomplishes that, I can live with it. Better they're afraid of us than we're mourning more dead civilians. 3 months later, Reyes attended the peace signing ceremony at Earth's lunar station. The Talvin and Korvax representatives formally ended 8 years of warfare. The treaty included provisions for shared mining operations, trade agreements, and dispute resolution through arbitration. Humans didn't control any of the disputed territory. They simply guaranteed that fighting over it would never happen again. Ambassador Grant gave a brief speech about cooperation and mutual respect. He thanked both sides for choosing peace over continued conflict. He emphasized humanity's commitment to maintaining stability in the region. He made it all sound friendly and optimistic. But everyone in that room remembered the steadfast mercy. They remembered 8 destroyed warships. They remembered tungsten slugs punching through shields like they didn't exist. They remembered nuclear weapons bathing the battle space in radiation. The peace treaty was backed by hope for the future and fear of human consequences. Admiral Reth approached Reyes during the reception. The Talvin commander looked older than she remembered from their brief communication 6 months ago. War aged everyone. Captain Reyes, I want to thank you for your restraint during the Theta Station incident. You could have destroyed my fleet along with the Korvax. I appreciate that you chose not to. You withdrew when asked, Admiral. You respected human boundaries. That's the only requirement we have. May I ask you something? How many ships does Earth actually operate? The intelligence estimates vary wildly. Reyes smiled. Enough to protect our people, that's all you need to know. Reth nodded slowly. A wise answer. I hope we never find out the real number. So do I, Admiral, so do I. The reception continued with polite conversation and diplomatic niceties. Reyes left early to return to her ship. The Steadfast Mercy had a patrol route to complete. Human space needed protecting, and now everyone knew exactly what that protection looked like.